But the wider this whole, that is, either the Jewish people or Christendom, extends, the more an equality of rights is transposed into an equality of dependence, as happens when the believer in cosmopolitanism comprises in his whole the entire human race. The less is dominion over objects granted to any one individual, and the less of the ruling being's favor does he enjoy. Hence, each individual loses more and more of his worth, his pretensions, and his independence. This must happen because his worth was his share in dominion over objects. For a man without the pride of being the center of things, the end, his collective whole, is supreme, and being like all other individuals so small a part of that, he despises himself. Here there is no living union between the individual and his world. The object severed from the subject is dead, and the only love possible is a sort of relationship between the living subject and the dead objects by which he is surrounded. Since something dead here forms one term of the love relationship, love is girt by matter alone, and this matter is quite indifferent to it. Love's essence at this level, then, is that the individual in his innermost nature is something opposed to objectivity. He is an independent unit for whom everything else is a world external to him. That world is as eternal as he is, and while the objects by which he is confronted change, they are never absent. They are there, and his God is there, as surely as he is here. This is the ground of his tranquility in face of loss, and his sure confidence that his loss will be compensated because compensation is here possible. This attitude makes matter something absolute in man's eyes, but of course, if he never existed, then nothing would exist for him. And what necessity was there for his existence? That he might exist is intelligible enough, because beyond that collection of restricted experience which makes up his consciousness, there is nothing whatever. The eternal and self-complete unification with the object is lacking. But the individual cannot bear to think himself in this nullity. He exists only as something opposed to the object, and one of a pair of objects is reciprocally conditioned and conditioned. Thus his thought of self must transcend his own consciousness, for there is no determinate without something determined, and vice versa. In fact, nothing is unconditioned. Nothing carries the root of its own being in itself, subject and object, man and matter. Each is only relatively necessary. The one exists for the other, and hence exists in and for itself only on the strength of a power outside itself. The one shares in the other only through that power's favor and grace. Nowhere is any independent existence to be found except in an alien being. It is this being which presents man with everything. This is the being which man has to thank for himself and for immortality, blessings for which he begs with fear and trembling. True union, or union proper, or love proper, exists only between living things who are alike in power, and thus in one another's eyes, living beings from every point of view. In no respect is either dead for the other. This genuine love excludes all oppositions. It is not the understanding, whose relations always leaves the manifold of related terms as a manifold, and whose unity is always unity of opposites, left as opposite. It is not reason either, because reason sharply opposes its determining power to what is determined. Love neither restricts nor is restricted. It is not finite at all. It is a feeling, yet not a single feeling among other single feelings. A single feeling is only a part and not the whole of life. The life present in a single feeling dissolves its barriers and drives on till it disperses itself in the manifold of feelings with a view to finding itself in the entirety of the manifold. This whole life is not contained in love in the same way as it is the sum of many particulars and isolated feelings. In love, life is present as a duplicate of itself and as a single and unified self. Here life has run through the circle of development from an immature to a completely mature unity. When the unity was immature, there still stood over against it if the world and the possibility of a cleavage between itself and the world. As development proceeded, reflection produced more and more oppositions, unified by satisfied impulses, until it set the whole of man's life in opposition to objectivity. Finally, love completely destroys objectivity, and thereby annuls and transcends reflection, deprives man's opposite of all foreign character, and discovers life itself without any further defect. In love, the separate does still remain, but as something united, and no longer as something separate. Life in the subject senses life in the object. Since love is a sensing of something living, lovers can be distinct only insofar as they are mortal, and do not look upon this possibility of separation as if there were really a separation, or as if reality were a sort of conjunction between possibility and existence. In the lovers there is no matter, they are a living whole. To say that the lovers have independence and a living principle peculiar to each of themselves means only that they may die and may be separated by death. To say that salt and other minerals are part of the makeup of a plant and that these carry in themselves their own laws governing their operation is the judgment of external reflection and means no more than that the plant may rot. But love strives to annul even this distinction between the lover as lover and the lover as a physical organism, to annul this possibility of separation as a mere abstract possibility, to unite with itself even the mortal element within the lover, and to make it immortal. If the separable element persists in either of the lovers as something peculiarly his own, before their union is complete, it creates a difficulty for them. There is a sort of antagonism between complete surrender, or the only possible cancellation of opposition, that is, its cancellation in complete union, and the still subsisting independence. Union feels the latter as a hindrance. Love is indignant if part of the individual is severed and held back as a private property. This raging of love against exclusive individuality is shame. Shame is not a reaction of the mortal body, not an expression of the freedom to maintain one's life, to subsist. The hostility in a loveless assault does injury to the loving heart itself, and the shame of this now injured heart becomes the rage which defends only its right, its property. If shame, instead of being an effect of love, an effect which only takes an indignant form after encountering something hostile, was something itself by nature hostile, which wanted to defend an assailable property of its own, then we would have to say that shame is most of all characteristic of tyrants, or of girls who will not yield their charms except for money, or of vain women who want to fascinate. None of these love. Their defence of their mortal body is the opposite of indignation about it. They ascribe an intrinsic worth to it, and are shameless. A pure heart is not ashamed of love, but it is ashamed if its love is incomplete. It upbraids itself if there is some hostile power which hinders love's culmination. Shame enters only through the recollection of the body, through the presence of an exclusive personality, or the sensing of an exclusive individuality. It is not fear for what is mortal, for what is merely one's own, but rather a fear of it, a fear which vanishes as the separate element in the lover is diminished by his love. Love is stronger than fear. It has no fear of its fear, but led by its fear it cancels separation, apprehensive as it is of finding opposition which may resist it, or be a fixed barrier against it. It is the mutual giving and taking. Through shyness its gifts may be disdained, through shyness an opponent may not yield to its receiving, but it still tries whether hope has not deceived it, whether it still finds itself everywhere. The lover who takes is not thereby made richer than the other. He is enriched indeed, but only so much as the other is. So too the giver does not make himself poorer. By giving to the other, he has at the same time and to the same extent enhanced his own treasure. Compare Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 1, lines 175 to 177. My bounty is as boundless as the sea. My love is deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have. The wealth of life love acquires in the exchange of every thought, every variety of inner experience. For it seeks out difference and devises unifications ad infinitum. It turns to the whole manifold of nature in order to drink love out of every life. What in the first instance is most individual's own, is united into the whole in the lover's touch and contact. Consciousness of a separate self disappears, and all distinction between the lovers is annulled. The mortal element, the body, has lost the character of separability, and a living child, a seed of immortality, of the eternally self-developing and self-generating race has come into existence. What has been united in the child is not divided again. In love and through love, God has acted and created. This unity, the child, however, is only a point, an undifferentiated unity, a seed. The lovers cannot so contribute to it as to give it a manifold in itself at the start. Their union is free from all inner division. In it there is no working on an opposite. Everything which gives the newly begotten child a manifold life and a specific existence, it must draw into itself, set over against itself, and unify with itself. The seed breaks from its eternal unity, turns ever more and more to opposition, and begins to develop. Each stage of its development is a separation, and its aim in each is to regain for itself the full richness of life, enjoyed by the parents. Thus the process is a unity, separated opposites, reunion. After their union, the lovers separate again, but in the child, their union has become unseparated. This union in love is complete, but it can remain so only so long as the separate lovers are opposed solely in the sense that the one loves and the other is loved. That is, that each separate lover is one organ in a living whole, yet the lovers are in connection with what must that is dead. External objects belong to each of them. This means that a lover stands in relation to things opposed to him in his own eyes as objects and opposites. This is why lovers are capable of a multiple opposition in the course of their multiple acquisition and possession of property and rights. The dead object in the power of one of the lovers is opposed to both of them, and a union in respect of it seems to be possible only if it comes under the dominion of both. The one who sees the other in possession of a property must sense in the other the separate individuality which has willed its possession. He cannot himself annul the exclusive dominion of the other, for this once again would be an opposition to the other's power, since no relation to an object is possible except mastery over it. He would be opposing a mastery to the other's dominion, and would be cancelling one of the other's relationships, namely his exclusion of others from his property. Since possession and property make up such an important part of men's life, cares and thoughts, even lovers cannot refrain from reflection on this aspect of this relation. Even if the use of the property is common to both, the right to its possession would remain undecided, and the thought of this right would never be forgotten, because everything which men possess has the legal form of property. But if the possessor gives the other the same right of possession as he has himself, community of goods is still the only right of one or other of the two in the thing.